There is something you have never said, not because you couldn't find the words, not because the moment never came, because somewhere between thinking it and opening your mouth you made a decision. You decided it wasn't worth it, or that they wouldn't get it, or that saying it out loud would cost you something you weren't prepared to lose. So you swallowed it, the way you've swallowed 100 things before it, and you smiled, or changed the subject, or said you were fine, and life continued. And the thing you didn't say went somewhere, because that's the part no one explains to you. Unexpressed emotion doesn't dissolve. It doesn't wait politely in a holding room until you're ready to deal with it. It goes into the body, into the nervous system, and into the places that don't have language, but have memory. And the body keeps a record of every word you decided not to say. This is about that record, and what it costs you to keep it. In the next 20 minutes, I am going to walk you through something that most people spend an entire lifetime not understanding about themselves. Chronic emotional suppression is not discipline. It is not maturity. It is not being the bigger person. It is a physiological and psychological event that leaves a measurable mark on your body, your brain, your relationships, and the version of yourself you are still becoming. By the time this ends, you will understand why the most emotionally intelligent people are often the least emotionally expressive. But you will understand what happens inside the body of someone who has spent years being the calm one, the composed one, the one who holds it together so everyone else can fall apart. You will see the specific mechanism by which silence becomes suffering, and you will have a framework, not a set of affirmations, not a breathing exercise, a real grounded framework for what comes next. Not because you are broken, but because you have been paying a price you didn't know you were paying, and it is time to see the bill. Let me describe something you know. Someone asks how you are, and for a fraction of a second, just a fraction, something honest moves through you. Not the surface answer, the real one. The one that would take time to explain properly. The one that has history in it. And the one that might make the room uncomfortable. And then, just as quickly, you close it. You say, "I'm good. Tired, but good." And they say, "I know the feeling." And you both move on, and somewhere in you, something registers the transaction for what it was. Not a conversation, a performance of one. You have been doing this for so long that it no longer feels like a choice. It just feels like who you are. The person who handles things. The person who doesn't make it weird. The person who can sit in a room full of pain and make everyone else feel steadier. And you are good at it. Genuinely. But somewhere underneath all that steadiness is a person who has been swallowing things for so long, they've forgotten what it felt like to actually say them. That forgetting, that particular numbness, is not peace. It is what happens when the body runs out of places to put things and starts converting them into something else entirely. Here is what is actually happening. And it matters that you understand this precisely, because the way this is usually described does not do justice to what it actually is. Psychologists distinguish between two things that look identical from the outside: emotional regulation and emotional suppression. Regulation is when you feel something fully and choose how to respond to it. Suppression is when you intercept the feeling before it fully arrives, and you redirect it, compress it, bury it before it can become something you have to deal with. Both look like composure. One of them is. The other is detonation on a delay. James Gross, a psychologist at Stanford, he spent years studying what happens inside people who chronically suppress emotional expression. The findings were not what most people expect. The suppressors did not feel less. They felt the same. But while the person next to them expressed what they felt and returned to baseline, the suppressor held it, compressed it, and their body continued responding to it long after the moment had passed. Cardiovascular activation, elevated cortisol, sustained physiological stress in response to an emotion that was never allowed to move through them. The body was still responding to the event. The face had moved on. This is not a minor distinction. Over years, over decades of swallowing things, this becomes cumulative. The immune system takes on the weight. Body inflammation markers rise in people who score high on habitual suppression. Sleep degrades. The threshold for overwhelm lowers. You become someone who can hold everything until, suddenly, you cannot hold anything, and you have no idea why, because nothing specific happened. Everything specific happened. Just slowly, just quietly, just under the surface of all that composure. There is a second mechanism. Beyond the body, suppression consumes cognitive bandwidth. Every time you push something down, you spend mental resources doing it. The same resources you use for memory, for decision-making, for being present in a room with other people. This is why chronically suppressive people often describe a fog, a flatness, a sense that their emotional range has narrowed without them choosing that. It has. The process of suppression does not selectively mute the difficult feelings. It mutes the range. The grief gets quieter, but so does the joy. So does the aliveness. And there's a third layer that almost no one talks about. The social one. When you suppress consistently, the people around you feel it even when they cannot name it. They sense a kind of distance, a wall they can see through but not touch. They try to get close, and something in the interaction feels slightly unreachable, so they stop trying as hard. Or they try differently, with more surface, less depth, because depth does not seem to be on offer. And you experience this as confirmation. Confirmation that no one really wants to know. That opening up is not worth the cost. That the composure is necessary for the relationship to survive, but the composure is what is killing the relationship. The silence created the distance. The distance justified the silence. It is a closed loop, airtight, self-sustaining, and the only thing that breaks it is understanding how it was built. I want to tell you about a woman named Sarah. Sarah is 38. She grew up in a house where emotion was noise, not a rule anyone stated, nothing written down, just the temperature of the place. Her father was not cruel. He was simply elsewhere, physically present and emotionally unavailable in the way that some men of his generation were trained to be. Her mother managed the household by managing everyone's feelings before they had the chance to become feelings. If Sarah cried, her mother would fix the thing that caused the crying, efficiently, lovingly, without ever sitting with Sarah in the feeling itself. So Sarah learned not to feel less, to feel quickly, and then to convert the feeling into something functional as fast as possible. By 14, she was the person her friends called in crisis. By 22, she was the colleague everyone trusted. By 30, she was the manager who stayed calm when everyone else was falling apart. She was extraordinary at it, and exhausted in a way she could not explain to anyone who asked, because explaining it would require her to say, "I am tired of being the person who holds things. I have never been held. I don't know if I remember how to need that." She had a partner who loved her. She had friends who showed up. She had a life that, to anyone watching, looked like a person who had figured it out. But Sarah had a private habit, And at the end of difficult days, she would sit in her car in the parking garage for between 5 and 20 minutes before going inside. Not listening to music, not on her phone, just sitting, letting something she couldn't name move through her in the only space where no one needed anything from her. She mentioned this to a therapist once, almost as an aside. The therapist asked, "What happens in the car?" Sarah thought about it for a long time. She said, "I think I cry sometimes, but not about anything specific, just in general." The therapist said, "How long has this been happening?" Sarah said, "I don't remember not doing it." The car was not a coping mechanism. The car was the only place where the accumulated weight of all the things she hadn't said had permission to exist. Just for a few minutes, before she put it back, and went inside and became the person everyone needed her to be. The car was not the problem. The car was the symptom. The problem was that the parking garage was the only honest place in her life. So what do you actually do with this? Not a mantra, not a breathing technique, not a generic instruction to feel your feelings, a real framework for the specific kind of person this is about. The composed one, the capable one, the one who has built a life around holding things and is beginning to feel the weight of that choice. Step 1. Name the difference between regulation and suppression. This is where it starts. Because you cannot change something you are still misidentifying. Regulation looks like this. Something happens. You feel it fully. You stay with it long enough to understand what it is, and then you choose a response. Suppression looks like this. Something happens. You feel the first edge of it, and you redirect. You think about something else. You get busy. You focus on what needs to be done. Both feel like composure from the outside. From the inside, they feel nearly identical until you learn to notice the difference. The difference is this. After regulation, there is a settling, a kind of internal quiet that is actual quiet. After suppression, there is a tightness, a low-grade hum that doesn't go away, a sense that something is unfinished that you can't quite locate. Start noticing which one is happening, not to judge it, just to see it, because you cannot course-correct a pattern you have been calling something else. Step 2. Find the sensation before the word. Here is the problem with telling people to express their feelings. For chronic suppressors, the feeling often doesn't arrive as a feeling anymore. It arrives as a headache, as a tension across the shoulders, as a low-level irritability with no identifiable source, as fatigue that sleep doesn't fix. The emotion has been routed through the body so consistently that the body has become the primary language. So you start there. Before you try to name the feeling, before you try to express it, before you decide whether it's worth saying, you locate it. Where is it in your body right now? Not metaphorically, actually. The chest, the jaw, the throat, the stomach. Sit with that location for 60 seconds. Not to fix it, not to understand it, just to acknowledge it as real. This is not a spiritual exercise. This is a re-entry. You are teaching your nervous system that it is safe to finish the signal instead of cutting it off. Step 3. Say the specific thing to yourself first. The reason people try to express emotion to others before they are ready is that they are hoping the other person will help them understand what they feel. That is a real need, but it cannot be the first step, because when you outsource the translation of your inner world to someone who is not inside it, you will almost always get back something close, but not quite right. And that almost, that near miss, is one of the loneliest experiences available to a human being. So you go first. Say the specific thing, out loud, alone, in your car if that's the only honest place you have, in the shower, ye into a voice memo you never send. Not the summarized version. Not the version edited for someone else's comfort. The full version, in whatever language it actually exists in, before you have translated it into something receivable. Let it be as long as it needs to be. Let it be as strange as it is. Let it be unsayable. Because the act of giving it form, even imperfect form, even language that doesn't quite fit, is the beginning of the thing releasing. Step 4. Separate the feeling from the obligation to act on it. This is the fear underneath the suppression. Most chronic suppressors are not primarily afraid of judgment. They are afraid of what happens next. If I say I am angry, I have to do something about it. If I say I am hurt, the relationship has to change. If I say I am exhausted by this, I have to figure out what I'm exhausted by, and then I have to dismantle it. And that is more than I have the capacity for right now. So the feeling gets buried, not to hide it from others, but to avoid the avalanche it might trigger. Here is the reframe. Feeling something does not require action. You can feel angry and choose not to confront. You can feel hurt and choose to sit with it before you speak. You can feel exhausted and acknowledge it without immediately solving the source. The feeling and the decision about what to do with it are two separate events. When you conflate them, the fastest way to avoid the difficult decision is to suppress the feeling entirely. But when you separate them, when you let the feeling exist without it automatically demanding action, the urgency drops, and something that was unbearable at full pressure becomes navigable at its actual size. Step 5. Build a ledger of what silence has cost. Chronic suppressors are meticulous at calculating the cost of speaking, the conflict it might create, the discomfort it might cause, the perception it might change. They almost never calculate the cost of not speaking, so you do it deliberately. What have you not said in the last year that is still living in your body? What relationship has thinned because the real version of you was not present in it? What version of yourself went quiet to keep a situation comfortable? And where is that version now? This is not an exercise in self-pity. It is an exercise in accurate accounting. You have been treating silence as the low-risk option. It is not. It is simply a risk that accumulates out of sight. When you see it clearly, when you actually look at the ledger, the calculus changes, and speaking begins to look less like the dangerous choice and more like the one you cannot afford not to make. I want to say something to the person who has spent a long time being the steady one, the one who makes things calmer when they walk into a room, the one who does not add to the chaos, the one whose feelings are perpetually secondary to what the room requires of them. What you did was not weakness. It was an intelligent adaptation to an environment that rewarded composure. You learned very early and very well that your interior was most useful to the people around you when it was invisible, and so you made it invisible. You became fluent in other people's needs at the expense of literacy in your own, and the world rewarded you for it, trusted you, leaned on you, called you strong. And strength, when it is the only thing you are allowed to be, eventually becomes a kind of cage, one you built yourself with the best intentions, for entirely understandable reasons. But the things that went unspoken, they did not leave. They are still there, preserved, waiting, not with resentment, not with accusation, just waiting to be acknowledged as real, because that is all unexpressed emotion ever wanted. not to be fixed, not to be solved, not to cause damage. Just to be real, just to be witnessed, even if only by you. You are not too much. You were given containers that were too small. There is a difference, and the difference matters, because one of those things is a character flaw, and the other is a circumstance. You are a circumstance that has been misread as a character flaw for long enough. There is a moment. Most people who suppress know this moment, where something happens and you feel the full weight of it rise in you. And for a fraction of a second, you almost let it. You almost say the thing. You almost let someone see the real version of the moment. And then, you don't. And life moves on, and you forget you almost let it, until you're in the parking garage again, or in the shower, or awake at 3 a.m. with a tightness in your chest and no explanation for it. That moment, the one where you almost let it, that is the most important moment you are not paying attention to. Because inside that moment is the entire map of where your suppression lives, what it protects, what it costs, and what it would take for you to let it be real. The words you never said are not gone. They are in your body, in your jaw, in the fatigue that doesn't lift, in the relationships that never quite deepened, in the life that is good, objectively, measurably good, and somehow still feels like it's missing something you cannot name. You can name it. You just haven't been given permission to. Consider this permission, not to say everything to everyone, not to dismantle the composure overnight, not to perform feeling for the benefit of a world that has only ever rewarded you for hiding it. Just to stop lying to your body, just to let the thing that rose in you actually finish rising. Even once, even in the car, even alone, because the first time you let something be fully real without immediately converting it into composure, something changes. Not everything, but enough. Enough to remember that you are not the steadiness. You are the person inside it. And that person, the full version, the unedited version, the one who almost said it, has been waiting a long time to take up the space they were always meant to occupy. There is a specific kind of person this pattern produces over time. Someone who has suppressed so long and so well that the suppression is no longer a behavior. It has become an identity. The story of how that happens and what it takes to untangle yourself from a self you built, to survive instead of live, that is the next conversation. If this reached something in you, sit with it. You don't have to do anything with it yet. Just let it be true.